There is some psychological test that was done using a lab rat where they had this rat go through a maze, and the rat got through the maze pretty easily. But then they had the rat go through the maze with some type of vulture bird hanging over the maze. The mouse, aware of the fact the vulture was there, in fear, could not get through the maze. Fear overwhelmed it, and it could not do what it so easily did just moments before. And I bring that up because fear is such a powerful factor of life. We have a world that's riddled with fear. So many people right now are struggling with anxiety, particularly people in their 30s. It's amazing how many people in their 30s right now are on anti-anxiety medication, because the world has them in such fear. I think it's partly due to the lack of faith that our world has fallen to such fear, because without faith we fall to fear. And fear is such a very powerful motivator, right? Fear is something that makes us make decisions that are not always the best decisions. We look at, I mentioned yesterday, and I think some people may have misunderstood my point in saying act prudently and carefully. Those are my first words, but don't act in fear. So, for example, if you have comorbidities, and it would be prudent not to be, in areas where you could become infected with the virus. But if you don't have comorbidities and you stay safe and you act prudently, well, then you're not living in fear, right? You're acting prudently and wisely. Both are. Anyway, the point is that we don't allow fear to rule our lives. And fear becomes such a powerful force that it has, in fact, led to the loss of many lives. When Moses was just a baby, the new Pharaoh, who knew not Joseph, wanted to destroy the Hebrew people because he was afraid that the Hebrew men would rise up in an army and destroy Egypt. And so as a result, out of fear, he massacred all the boys by throwing the newborns into the Nile, drowning them. It was an order that he gave. And Moses was saved through his mother and his sister putting him in a basket and sending him down the river. Hence his name, Moses, being plucked from the river. But it was in fear that caused the massacre of all of those children. And this has been played out throughout history in various ways and times. We see today, and today's feast day was brought about through fear. We have King Herod, who is afraid of the loss of his throne. He's afraid to be overthrown. And that fear leads him to massacre every boy 2 years old and under throughout all of Bethlehem and the surrounding region. We think it was just the little town of Bethlehem, but it wasn't. It was all the surrounding towns as well that he killed every boy 2 years old and younger out of fear. Well, fear of the prophecy that the child to be born in Bethlehem was going to crush the head of the Edomite, and Herod was an Edomite. He was from Edom. He was not a Davidic king. So he had, cause for fear, but his fear led him to the slaughter of so many millions of, I can presume 1,000 children. We can presume somewhere upwards of 1,000. But it was fear that led him. When we see so many various times throughout history of the massacring of innocents, it is always fear. Fear will sometimes turn to hatred. Hatred will then lead to murder, as we see with both Herod and Pharaoh. In our own present day and age today, we see the same fear that takes hold of hearts and leads to, again, slaughter and murder. When you ask people why they had an abortion, you will ask, the answer will always come as a form of fear, right? Fear that they're not going to be able to take care of the child, fear of not having the money for the child, fear that they won't be supported, fear that the child will be handicapped, fear, all these fears. Now, for some people, there's that the child gets in their way, but again, it's the fear of having to change their lifestyle if a child comes into the world. Fear certainly has been dictating abortion for the past 40 years, almost 50 years in our country. Fear is a very powerful motivator. And it's when we actually walk into the light and we see the fear for what it really is, then we then can walk with a freedom from the fear. And fear works in darkness, right? Fear loves to work in darkness. When it doesn't, in cloudiness, that's when we become afraid, when we're in the dark. When I was a child, I was afraid of the basement because it was dark down there. And my older brother happened to tell me that there were alligators down there that will eat me if I go down there. So I was a little kid, I'd climb on the banister, reach around without my feet touching the floor and turn the light on, because of course when the light comes on, the alligators scatter, right? So fear worked in the darkness, but light dispelled the darkness, that there were no alligators in the basement, right? And so whenever we put light on a situation, fear tends to go away. When we look to the truth, fear goes away, because then we're walking in truth, not in fear. So today I just invite us to turn more each and every day to truth and not to fear. What is the ultimate truth? That God loves us unto death, has granted us the gift of sanctifying grace, has bestowed upon us grace upon grace, adopted us as his children, and even death itself cannot destroy us, because it grants us the gift of an everlasting life if we die in grace. So ultimately there is nothing to be afraid of. God has us. He cares about it. He loves us. We know in faith, the light of Christ, that nothing will happen to us, be it good or ill, that is not designed for our good. And we trust that God will get us through whatever it is that might come our way. Faith is the light that dispels the darkness of fear, and we need to trust in that gift of faith. Today we remember all of these children who were killed in Bethlehem and the surrounding region out of fear. They died for Christ because Herod was seeking to kill Christ, and so they died for Christ when they were not even able to speak, some of them. But it was fear that did it. So today we ask the Lord to grant us the gift to always be delivered from any fear, to truly trust in his love, that faith may be increased in our land, and that we may do everything in our power to increase faith, so that fear and darkness may be dispelled from this land. May the light of faith shine upon our world and dispel the fear that is leading to death to so many. May God bless you, and Merry Christmas.